Last night for supper, we had the nicest tea you ever drank. Strong and hot, wheat bread and rye bread, cheese, tea cakes, elegant. A great dish, 2 dishes of elegant ham, and 2 of cold veal, piled up like a mountain in large slices. 3 dishes of the cakes, and everything in the greatest profusion. No fear of starving here. This is a quote from a letter to Muddy while in New York on Sunday morning, April 7th, 1844, just before breakfast, from Mr. Poe. Greetings, Poe fans, and welcome to our Gothic birthday tea party to celebrate Edgar Allan Poe's 215th birthday.
Yay!
I am Carmen Bolden.
And I'm Jeanie Smith, and we are
the
POEcast
2. And we
well, at least
have
2 at one point.
Yes, and we have 2 extremely very special guests, our sister and brother podcast from Beyond the Oblong Box, Virginia Poe and Levi Leland. So welcome.
Woo! Thank you for having us.
Yes, we are so excited to be able to celebrate Poe's birthday with you guys.
I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate together.
This is fantastic.
It's going to be a great episode.
Yes, absolutely. So kind of first up of what we were going to talk about was, where was Poe born and when was Poe born? I think many people out there in Poe land know this, but it never hurts to be reminded. So who wants to begin?
Well, Poe was born, of course, January 19th, 1809.
Yes.
Ding, ding.
It's become like a holiday for me in my life as well. You know, January 19th and October 7th. I don't know about you guys, but they're like Poe holidays, you know, and you kind of commemorate him in your own little way on those days. Like, I'll admit, sometimes I get a piece of birthday cake and I have it on January 19th for Poe, and I kind of read some of his works or maybe a biography of him or something. I just try to incorporate Poe into my life on that day, you know? And yeah, he was born in Boston, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I don't want to totally hog the spotlight if anyone has any more to add.
Well, I do have a couple little fun things that I found on this day in history with like to the actual date. Not I actually found some other things on this day in history, but he was born on a Thursday, and so just kind of pulling from that old nursery rhyme that Thursday's child has far to go. And I think that totally goes with Poe. And so I tried to little rhyme there.
That's interesting.
I was also born on a Thursday.
Oh, awesome. Yes, I was a Tuesday.
That's really cool.
I was Wednesday, so I got y'all beat.
Levi, what were you?
I was born on a Monday, the worst day of the week.
Oh, no.
But you made it better.
I made it better, right?
Take it back.
We'll go with that.
Take Mondays back.
Yes. And the other thing that I found in 1809, that was not a leap year. Just, you know, it's always kind of interesting to find out those little tidbits of, you know.
Well, leap years aren't on odd number of years.
Right. But I don't know if a lot of people know that.
Huh? I was like, yeah, no, it's the moon cycle. They should understand this from their 6th grade science class.
Now, Jeanie, do you really think everybody is going to remember everything from every 6th grade teacher that they have learned from?
No, but they should know the normal things, considering we have to celebrate it every 4 years. That's why we have 365 days in a year, and then 3, because a fourth of the moon rotation. Okay, sorry.
Okay, anyway. All right. Yeah, you could digress forever. We will reel you in. Anybody else?
We can jump on. Yeah, I was going to jump in here and talk a little bit about births during Boston, Massachusetts. Now, most people in the colonial times, there was a really high percentage of mortality rate.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't have the medications, because many women could die from preeclampsia, from busted blood vessels, loss of blood, infection, everything. So many of the women in the earlier years before the good stuff came along would actually make out these verbal type of wills of what would happen in case they died during childbirth, who and their child lived, what they expected from them, who they expected them to go to. All that was taken care of during that time that they were pregnant.
Okay.
So, but the mortality rate was sometimes up to like 50%. So it was like a 50-50 shot, whether you could live or whether the baby would live, whether you would live, or both died, whatever. But one of the interesting facts, as I was discussing earlier, is in 1809, they had opened the door to start vaccinating against one of the major contagious at that time was smallpox. I mean, smallpox was running rampant around everywhere. There were hospitals dedicated just to smallpox. So Boston became the first area of the United States that mandated vaccines in 1810 for everybody to get for smallpox.
Okay.
And so I thought that was kind of interesting because even though Edgar was, a year old, I wonder if he ever was vaccinated, because some of them, and this is the thing, they would actually charge a small fee for vaccinations. So the poor people in the rural areas were still not getting the vaccination. So, but Boston, I think it was around 1850s maybe, that they actually started making them free, so they could be for anybody. Because that's when the health departments, I guess, stepped in.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I would have never thought vaccines were even a thing at that time.
Yeah.
I would have never thought that. So to think, when Poe was born, vaccines were up and coming.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So he brought them with him when he born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, let me bring something good. Woohoo!
Right.
Yeah.
That wasn't the only thing he brought. That was good. He brought,
absolutely.
his brain as well. But no,
Yes,
for
his
sure,
brain.
it's definitely
That beautiful,
interesting.
beautiful brain.
Yeah. I also looked up the address where he was born was at that time 62 Carver Street in a boarding house. And it's now, unfortunately, a parking lot. It would have been so cool. Yeah, it'd be so cool if that still existed.
Yeah, I think they do have a plaque dedicated to him and the birthplace in Boston, but unfortunately the building is no longer there.
Yeah.
I think the statue makes up for it. So
it does.
Yeah, the statue is
cool
nice.
I like it.
I do too. One of the times that I went to visit there, right around the corner is a little gift antique shop, and I can't remember the lady's name, and there's an article about her, and we can include that in our resources. But when I went in and I was looking at all the Poe gifts that she had, she said, "How do you like my statue?" And she was part of the preservation and actually getting the statue done. And the article's really cool. And she's, I think, I think she's going on 100. She's a neat lady. So if you ever get a chance, check out that little shop. Cool. Yeah.
I definitely will the next time I'm down.
So any other little cool facts about Boston or Poe, around the time of his birth that you guys came up with?
It might be important to note that the reason Poe was born in Boston was simply because his parents were there for work.
Yes.
He didn't really have any roots there as far as I've researched and just know in general, knowing Poe all these years. But his parents were traveling actors. So Boston was just one of those cities that had a huge theater following. So they had some work for his mother and father, especially his mother, who was quite renowned as an actress at that time. So Poe was born in Boston because that's where his parents just happened to be when he was
doing performances
and working. His paternal roots are in Baltimore. Of course, the Poes immigrated from Ireland and came to Baltimore, and they kind of had roots there. His grandfather and grandmother and his father, and of course Poe died in Baltimore, but again, just passing through. He wasn't really so. A lot of major happenings in Poe's life are just incidental as far as the locations go, and his birth is just one of those incidental places that, you know, Boston happened to be when he was born. So
absolutely,
but today they can make that claim, so it's good for them. They can claim him as their son, but they hated each other. Poe, Boston, Poe, they hated each other. So
I know. And he's even what wasn't it his first works of poetry, he called it, or he said it, signed it from a Bostonian. And so that's interesting too, especially with the love-hate relationship.
Yes.
If you want to add irony to it, here we think this. We can think that maybe Poe was born in a theater, you know, living over top of it or whatever. But because he was born to theater parents, and there was one other guy that was born in 1809 on February the 12th, Mr. Abraham Lincoln, that got killed in a theater.
Yes.
So,
yes,
you know, Edgar brought him to,
Charles Darwin was also born on Lincoln's birthday as well, the same year. A lot of big people
Darwin, that's right,
in that first couple months of 1809. It's very interesting. Some other noted people that were born on Poe's birthday that some people may not know about, or well, one particular, Dolly Parton.
Dolly.
You've got the butterfly, you've got the raven, or the raven came first, then the butterfly.
Yeah, she has to make some kind of Poe related or Poe themed song. She's just got to do it. I think the internet is forcing her to do so.
I hope so. And then Tippi Hedren as well. And so loving the little connection to the Alfred Hitchcock with the birds and just the raven piece of it. That's really kind of cool.
Yeah, Hitchcock, of course, being heavily influenced by Poe. Another interesting thing too about Lincoln, I've read, and this could be a myth, but I'm not sure, that he enjoyed the Raven. He had it memorized, I think. Abraham Lincoln, so he was kind of a Poe fan.
I think I've heard that before. Yes.
Yeah.
I've read that somewhere.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if it was hearsay.
Yes.
Or if it was factual truth. I have no idea.
That's something we'll have to look up definitely and see if we can find the source, like if it's a credible source and that kind of thing. Because I think I've read it as well. So the other thing I know we were going to talk about is just kind of around his birthday, weather. What was the weather like, you know, the day he was born?
Well, January in Boston, probably cold.
I'm going to guess snow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I kind of snowy.
I was going to say we had snow this morning.
Yes, and I mean, and with snow, it's like you think of the dark and the dreary. And one thing that I've kind of actually looked up weather, and I could not find like specific things. The Farmer's Almanac, you had to kind of pay for additional information because they do go back that far, but I just didn't have a chance to do that. But in the early 1800s to the 1810s were somewhat dry from what I looked up. However, in 1812, you know, after Poe was born, they had intense frigid winters that year. And then New Englanders in the 18th century basically grew up with a lot of extremes, and they called it the Little Ice Age, kind of end of the 1700s up through the beginning of the 1800s. From 1800 to 1830 was in that area was the coldest periods basically of the last millennium is what they kind of called it. So, and then apparently around 1808 to 1809, they're considering this as part of why they had these frigid temperatures. There was an unidentified volcanic eruption that was estimated to have occurred, and it affected the entire North Atlantic. And so it's almost kind of like, you know, of course, because, you know, Poe being Poe and how much we love Poe, it's like this volcanic eruption had to do with his death. His birth. And so just being silly about it.
Yeah.
You
could almost consider
he's got a big personality, so he had to come in with a bang.
his life was a bit of a volcanic eruption, I would say.
Yes.
in a lot of ways, at a lot of moments.
I was going to put a little fun spin on that, maybe.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really interesting.
He's a little volcano.
Yeah. And then apparently after that, the unidentified volcanic eruptions led to another mountain a volcano that did erupt. And I can't remember where that was, but it was somewhere in that area or something. But it caused even more things. But that was the big part of the coldness. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
That is fascinating.
I know.
I mean, that is the thing about weather, and especially with volcanoes. Like, if you've got all that ash in the air, it's going to get cold because it's going to create my science words are not coming to me at the moment.
Yeah. But, Jeanie, science.
Jeanie, help me.
It's a blanket effect because the ash in the atmosphere is blocking out the sun rays from getting through the stratosphere. So,
which is what creates the warmth, and without that coming through, temperatures are going to drop.
Yeah.
From what I understand is that the weather recording and monitoring didn't really take off until like the mid 1800s, a little later.
Yeah, that's what it seemed. About 1883 is where I was really finding really good. Like, you could plug in the year, the city, state, and it would give you, like a lot of information.
Apparently, the Smithsonian Institution, I guess they had given weather instruments to like telegraph companies to encourage them to start recording the weather. And so I think it was like 150 volunteers or so started telegraphing the weather reports to the Smithsonian, and they were then able to keep a record of it. And I think they were also making weather maps too. So that aided in their production of weather maps and all that. So it was very elusive to find any specific weather on Poe's actual birthday. But if we jump ahead a little bit, we can find more accurate reports. But it must have been a cold, from what we kind of can get the gist of. It was definitely a cold January day. I'm sure there was a fire lit in the room for Eliza, and she was giving birth to what would become one of the world's most famous writers.
Absolutely, with a volcanic bang.
with volcanic ash in the sky, and I assume there were ravens flying around.
Yes. The ash turned into the ravens. Oh my goodness. Well, one other thing I think we were also going to talk about was birthday practices during the 1800s and around Poe's birth date. And so what did everybody find about that?
So I delved into this pretty hardcore, and it's kind of sad that we don't have as much written record about how most places would celebrate one's birth. Like, for us in modern day society, it's a thing. And it's, for us, it's always been a thing because it's been a thing since before our grandparents were around, or for some of us, our great grandparents even. However, birthday parties, celebrations of one's birth, there are records that do go back to ancient Egypt, where a pharaoh, on their day of coronation, so to speak, that was considered their birthday as a god, because they looked at their pharaohs as little g's. So that was their birthday, and they would have lavish celebrations for that day. So in all intent and purposes, there are birthday celebrations that go back that far. I know that there are some. I was trying to find more detailed record about ones that they apparently did also do in the ancient Roman Empire. But I think, again, it was for more, what I read, it was for more like dignitaries, people of the state, so to speak, not the common person. Yeah. But in the 1800s, especially in the 1830s, and more for the wealthy, So this is where it becomes a very divided thing. It really wasn't about, yes, there was a high mortality rate for children then. Yes. I mean, there was a high mortality rate for children even in the 1700s, the 1600s. But in the 1800s, there was just so much, partly due to ever-changing society and new industrial things and, you know, people migrating from other areas of the world and bringing, you know, and we get all this passing of things. And so we have a lot of diseases that we may not have known or had before.
Yeah.
Children did have a high mortality rate, especially then. And so they would celebrate that child the next year on the day of their arrival because they made it another year.
Yeah.
But for the wealthy, it was really more a show of that wealth, of that status, of that power, not necessarily about celebrating the fact that their child made it another year. Also use it as a time of education to teach their children like table etiquette, social dancing, because these kids were going to be, you know, coming up into society, so to speak. The adult birthday parties were even more lavish, even more a show display, and they were generally more of a almost like masquerade themed more often than not.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Then, of course, now in the 1860s, 1880s, that's when more of the middle class started to adopt birthday party practices as well. With the wealthy, of course, something that they borrowed from the Germans, because the Germans did this, was the making of multi-layer cakes. And
I read that as well. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things they would do with these cakes is they would bake things like coins and thimbles inside the cake, kind of like a baby king cake in the sense for
that is neat
for Mardi Gras. But if you got the coin, it meant that you were going to be blessed with wealth. If you got the thimble, it meant you were never going to marry.
Yep.
Wow.
All right.
I'm glad we don't do that now.
Yeah. And as one who sews, however, I do not use a thimble. I just don't. It's like that's horrible on sewing.
that is a right. I take offense to that.
Yes, exactly.
So, and then of course it was a little later on, more towards the beginning of the 1900s, that the lower class, the more poor, actually started to adopt celebrating birthdays as well. I know the writer Laura Ingalls Wilder, she actually talked much about her earliest recollections of her birthdays, which were in the late 1800s. And she was talking about how her mother made her this doll, and like her father gave her like 6 Spanx and 1 to grow on, you know. And so and I was trying to find out where that practice of birthday Spanx came from.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
Could not find it. But interestingly enough, there was a tradition. So this is really interesting about the things that the, you know, upper class would do for their birthdays. So for every year that you lived, your friends and family would give you a bump, which meant that they held you by your hands and feet, and they would raise you in the air and bring you down, and raise you in the air and bring you down. And they would do that for every year that you had made it. And then they would give you 1 more for luck, 2 more for luck, and 3 for the old man's coconut. Again, tried to find out what that meant and found nothing.
Oh, wow.
So I was a little sad because I am very interested in to know what the old man's coconut means.
Yes.
Yeah, we might not want to know, honestly.
Yeah, that might be something better left unsaid.
That's true,
but unknown.
Virginia, kind of with the whole, the bump, with the one to grow on, with the, the spanking, the one to grow on.
I'm wondering if that came from that, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure, because I tried to find anything.
Yeah.
Anything, anywhere. I found way more things about marriage and engagement practices, but birthdays, not so much. So I was having a really hard time finding that sort of thing. And I reached out to quite a few historians.
Okay.
And they were like, and even they were a little perplexed by this. Birthday cards, as we know it now, that really actually started in England a little more than 100 years ago. So that's just kind of grown. Interestingly enough, in England, another birthday practice, but again, this was something the upper society did. I'm sure probably some of the middle class did as well.
Mm-hmm.
But for your 21st birthday, now here in the United States in modern day, it's because you're legal to drink in a bar, and it's like, okay. But in the 1800s in England, on your 21st birthday, you were presented with a key. And that key was symbolic of you coming of age, being an adult, and saying to the man that it was given to, this was never done for women, that they could come and go as they please and stay out as late as they wish.
Okay. That's interesting.
Well,
given the 1800s, they're a little side eye.
Yeah, I have never heard that before. That is fascinating.
And in children's birthday parties, I know they did this in England. They did this here in the United States too, in the 1800s. With these children's birthday parties, often 40, 50 families would be invited to come. They were not obligated to bring a gift, though often they were. Mm-hmm. It was often the parents who presented the children with this very special gift, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But they would often give out favors to the families and guests that came, and usually it would be little packets of candy, or ribbons for your hair, or like paper fans, little trinkets, bookmarks even. So, children would receive those kinds of things in those parties. Yeah.
That's pretty neat. And I think some people do that today. I think of more favors at weddings and things. But
yeah, exactly.
That's really neat.
Well, I remember being a kid when the few times I did have like a birthday party like that. We did have little favor bags for the people that came. No?
Yeah, that's fun. Did anybody else find any birthday like history or anything like that?
I mean, other than what I found.
Yeah, you found a lot. That's really interesting, Virginia.
Yeah, I just found that kind of going off of Virginia's research that, the birthday celebrations weren't really much of a thing until like the later 1800s. And then by the 20th century, it was like, throughout
more commonplace
America, it was more common. But for Poe, and I'm sure his inner circle, it's doubtful they even celebrated a birthday, or it was probably just like any other day.
That's true. Yeah, you kind of wonder when he was a child living with the Allens if they did anything like that. But with how John Allen felt about him, he might not have even allowed it, like to celebrate Edgar's birthday.
Or it also makes me wonder,
because they
with
lived
everyone
in England,
that he knew. Yeah.
With
everyone that he knew.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And some of them were quite well to do. How many of them had those?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, Jeannie, I thought you were going to bring something up too.
Well, I was just going to say that I think I figured out what the old man's coconut means.
She's been digging.
Yes. Well, it's I found this article that's really cool. It talks about all the different birthday traditions in different areas of the world.
Okay.
So England, that makes sense because this is England's tradition that when it's your birthday, your friends give you the bumps. They lift you in the air by your hands and feet, bump you up and down to the floor. So, one for each ear, then one for luck, two for luck, and three for the old man's coconut, meaning your head. The old man becomes the third.
Okay.
You're born, you live, you die. The old man's coconut, that's the old brain.
Okay.
So, I mean, that just can't, because there's no actual definition, like many things from times of history.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of information to it. A lot of stuff was not recorded because the education level was mostly just for the richer people.
Mm-hmm.
And even that, it was, not recorded on every front. So you didn't really know.
Right.
So there is now Germany. Now Germany is where the birthday person's family wakes up at sunrise and lights the candles on the birthday cake. They actually have a birthday cake.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
It's very strange because in China, you actually pay homage to the child pays respect to his or her parents, and then receives a gift of money.
Oh, wow.
So they're invited to a lunch of
That's
noodles.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, lucky noodles.
Yeah, lucky noodles.
Okay.
And then Hungary, the birthday child actually brings sweets to school to give to the classmates, not the other way around.
Okay.
That's fun though.
I
like
did
that.
I did that as a child. Probably it was first grade through sixth grade, just because it was more contained. You had your one like homeroom, and my mother baked cupcakes, and we wrote each cupcake had each child's name on it. So like I would bring one and it would say Virginia. Then I'd bring one, with Levi's name and Jeannie's name. So everybody got their personalized cupcake. And I did that for, from first grade to sixth grade. And I remember
that's awesome.
We went to the seventh grade. Some of my friends were like, "Are we getting birthday cupcakes?" And I'm like, "I think I'm a little old for that now." They're like, "No,
you are never too old for
Such a
birthday
cool
cupcakes. You are never
Now,
too
this
old.
one that I just found in Russia, instead of a birthday cake, many Russian children receive a birthday pie, and there's a birthday greeting carved into the crust.
Oh, that's neat.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I do too. And the one thing about looking at the different celebrations from around the world, because America, especially in that time period, I was saying it was still a melting pot. We had a lot of cultures combining, moving in, coming in. So a lot of celebrations. Now we do celebrate more in today's society about a lot of different things. But back then, mostly it was just, very few.
Yeah.
So you had Christmas because it's according to religious ceremonies, basically in that time period.
Sure. Yeah. And Easter, kind of the same situation. Yeah. Well, and then we'd already kind of talked about just amongst ourselves that really the happy birthday song wasn't created until 1912, but then updated in 1924 by Robert Coleman to what we know now. Did you find something else out, Virginia?
Oh, yes.
Oh, cool.
So the original song, actually the melody for it was published in 1893.
Oh, okay.
So it's right on the seat of his pants, but it's an 1800s melody.
Okay.
And it was actually originally called Good Morning to All. And it was a song that was written by, and I know Jeanie and Carmen are going to love this when I say this, but it was written by two lovely women by the name of Mildred and Patty Hall. And they were sisters who were also teachers.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Very cool.
And it was later in 1924 where it became popularized with the alternate lyrics as Happy Birthday to You.
That's interesting. And so basically this year itself, the Happy Birthday song is, as we know it now, is
officially is 100.
Yeah.
Listen, 2024 is a big year.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
So that, yeah, it's officially like that iteration of the song is officially 100 years old
Yeah,
this year.
that's
So
neat.
originally written by two school teachers that were sisters.
Yes. That's
Oh
awesome.
yeah.
Oh,
Not surprising. If it's
yes.
happy, that's surprising. Just say, just
Uh-oh.
saying. It's like, oh goody, another day. Yay, happy birthday.
Yes. Well,
Oh,
Virginia, I'm glad you dug in as much as you did. You found out a lot of information.
Well, one important thing that I wanted to share with everyone, because I don't think it's anyone's surprise that I love cakes and I love cupcakes and tea. As my alternate ego is I am a tea fairy for children at children's festivals and other
Yes.
fairy events. But interesting fact about the birthday cake. So obviously, as Jeanie and I were discussing, it's from Germany. And when it was adopted in the rest of the world, of course, upper society, they would actually have multiple layers of cake. So it would be a
Okay.
multi-tiered cake.
Mm-hmm.
And that became definitely more the norm when the stacked stove became more of an available thing for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But the cake that was made by those in the middle class and the not so well off was actually a cake that was mostly made of fruit and nuts.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So the other cake, the more lavish cakes, of course, were your chocolate and raspberry and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. But for you know those who are not quite so showy with their wealth, their cake was a single layer cake that had mostly fruit and nuts.
Okay. So I guess
that
Yeah,
figures.
was it the style of like a traditional fruit cake we think about like for Christmas?
that I did not see. I don't
Okay.
think so. I think it was really like the round single layer style cake.
Okay.
I mean, it could have been,
Hmm.
but it didn't. Like nothing that I found about birthday cakes, no one specified.
Okay.
Just that it was fruit and nuts
Okay.
mostly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That really is.
So there you go.
Well, well, I guess because
Happy
fruits and
birthday.
nuts were the most
Yes.
abundant that they had. So,
True. True.
Hmm.
And they could make it stretch a little bit more too.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
that's true.
Probably
And
more
depending on
practical,
what, yeah, and depending
you
on
know.
what fruit you're using, what's in season, it would
Hmm.
probably add moisture to the cake. That's for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That
So,
probably helped, especially like winter. It would probably need it a lot. Well,
mhm.
I'm not going to eat one of these while we're on the episode, but
Oh,
we have, I think, thrown out some hints here and there that uh, Jeanie and I and my husband are working on a recipe book that's based on all of Poe's works and places. And what's really cool is Virginia and Levi are submitting something. Virginia for Virginia and
big
Levi
shock.
for Rhode Island. So we're excited about that. And so I did a recipe for this episode. I've had notes for a while, but finally did the research and made the recipe up. And the Oblong Box, which you'll hear a quote from later on, mentions green tea. Poe adds that in. And so these are the Oblong Box green tea cakes. And so, and I guess doing the research, I kind of was like thinking of a little tiny cake, and it's really more of just
Mhm.
like when you cut them, about a quarter-inch cookie that rises just a little bit. And then normally from back in post time, they were just the little cake. And if you make them thinner, they get crispier, but the thicker you make them, the more cake-like they are. And so I think that's where they called them tea cakes. And so, but I added the glaze on top it actually has green tea and honey. So it really does taste like green tea. And so it pairs very well with several different teas, especially green tea. I've tried it with a few different things, but we included that recipe when we did our little teaser. And so I'll include this again with the episode, but try them out. They're really good. Jeanie had one yesterday. And Jeanie, what'd you think?
Well, Carmen knows I have an aversion to most cookies.
She does.
I love Girl Scout cookies and chocolate chip, but only homemade. I can't stand Chips Ahoy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Don't like Oreos. Not I'm very particular when it comes to cookies, but it tasted really good. I liked it. It had just enough of everything.
Yeah.
However, the one thing that I thought about after she left, I'm like, well, since they had the English influence, did they actually call the tea cakes, were they biscuits? Because that's what they call cookies. So, when it's tea cakes.
I said, Virginia may know this answer more than me, because I know just like the quote I read earlier, it said tea cakes, but Virginia, you may have more of a history on that. I know something about tea.
I would need to reread some things, but I believe in America they refer to them as tea cakes. Over in England, the way, I'd have to look at the recipe again, but the way that you're talking about this particular tea cake that you've made, it's almost like a scone. Because when you do not like doing drop scones or like the triangular shaped scones, but like a lot of the scones that we make for our tea parties or have made for our tea parties, we do cut them out in little like teapot shapes. So because of the way we do the dough for the scones, they do rise a little bit, but they don't like get super fluffy. They rise a little bit. And then we do put glazes on them.
Okay.
Often with tea, like black tea, black tea glaze. So, but yeah, it's almost sounding like it's a scone.
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
But I'm sure because in England and the UK, biscuits are what we refer to here in the States as cookies.
Yes.
And there's all different types of biscuits, just like we have all types of cookies and cookies here. But I'm almost assuming that as America was trying to be more and more not of the motherland, they were coming up with terminology that was all their own. And so these were still the same kind of stuff that they made over there to have with tea, but they were just calling them tea cakes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like because of the cookie cutters I did kind of just make a few that were just round, because the little bit of history of Southern tea cakes, they all said like a round shape.
Yep.
But I had a bell for Christmas. I have a little tiny heart for Valentine's. So I was like, hearts and bells go with Poe. So
totally.
I need to find or maybe create and have someone make it a Poe head. That would be fun.
I think they have a Poe
head. Let me get back to
cutter.
You on that.
Okay.
I was going to say, I think that they do.
Okay.
They do. Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
You'll have to look it up online. I think you can get one.
We'll definitely
make a gingerbread Poe cake so you can bite its head off.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I have tombstones. I can make some later.
Oh, cool.
And make them in tombstone shapes. How about that?
Nice. I love it. Well, moving on to a different topic we're going to talk about, which is very far reaching from birthday cake and tea cakes, I guess you could say, are childbirth practices and things. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And so just because we know that he was born in a boarding house, Poe was born in a boarding house. And so what did you guys find about childbirth practices back then? Did anybody? I did look it up. If you guys did, I always like to ask first before I throw in.
I was kind of expecting Jeanie to have all sorts of responses
with the science. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, and what the research definitely can come up with based on what is actually was recorded, the doctors were very few and far between. So mostly women gave birth in their own homes, in their own bedrooms, with a midwife or just family members of female persuasion. Men were not allowed anywhere unless they were an actual doctor. And the doctor only came about if there was a necessity, like if they had trouble after the birth, if they needed some help. But mostly the women would give birth in their own homes and surrounded by midwives or their own family, and that was it. And it was only after they were, cleaned up were the males allowed near them. Even the babies have to be cleaned up because that was just a standard practice. Because they call them, they double check me on this. They call them Republican women in those days because it's when the society culture changed to where the population, their job was to bear children. Their job was to take care of the home. Their job was to provide for the males. That was their job in that type of society. Because, and just like what I would tell my kids in the classroom, women, no matter what race, women were still seen lower than any other, and they were the closest to property without actually being considered slaves.
Yeah.
They were not given rights. They were not given education. Only very few were allowed that right. There was a college in Oberlin, Ohio, I believe it was Ohio, that was created in the 1800s. That was an all-girls school.
Yeah.
It was still, they taught them math, they taught, science, language, that kind of thing. But it was still very, basic compared to what you would find in any other colleges in that area that men were allowed to, especially becoming doctors or anything that considered to be politically, chartered type of positions. Women couldn't hold that. It was very, very much seen that they were Republican women. And I used the air quotes. You can't see me, but I'm doing like Virginia did a minute ago, air quotes, Republican women, because most people don't understand that in that day and age, you can't equate the party of Republican to the same thing as saying Republican, because they were talking about a republic. That's a type of government, a type of society, not a political party.
Yeah.
So that's why they call them Republican women. And they just, women were just had to take care of things on their own. And a lot of women were dying from abortions because they didn't have the standard practices. They didn't have anybody they could go to. So they were dying because they were trying to get rid of the children.
Yeah.
Especially for young girls. Now, a lot of people have to understand in this day and age, girls, and I mean girls, the ages of 12 and 13, like Virginia Poe, not this Virginia Poe, but Edgar's Virginia. You're not that old, Virginia.
Some days I feel that old, Jeanie.
Yeah, true. Me too. But women, girls of those days, that was what they were known for. Because if they were born into a large family, for example, you say that, mortality rate was high, but there were some people that were having 9, 10, 11 children in a family. And when a girl got to a certain age, sometimes the father would sell them to get married so they can get, money. And just like with the boys, they would put them in apprenticeships because they couldn't feed them, they couldn't house them, they couldn't do anything. So, yeah, childbirth, it was a muddy affair. Most women, if they survived, was considered a miracle in that day and age.
Yep.
Because they didn't know about the things of what we do now. I mean, even in today's, that's the thing. Don't get me wrong, there's still a mortality rate in today's society, even with as much hospitalization and doctors and medical things that we know today, because you can't control everything in childbirth. It is the strain on a woman who's giving birth can cause blood clots, can cause aneurysms, can do a lot of damage. Blood, they could still die from blood loss.
Yeah.
My own grandmother gave her last child that she had. I mean, she gave birth at home. It was still a tradition in my neck of the woods to give birth at home in the early 1900s up till about mid 50s, I think it is. So her last child that she gave birth at home, she almost bled to death, right then and there. And it was only because the traveling doctor was close by that he came by and they rushed her to the hospital. But the funny thing was, they didn't take my aunt with them. She was left at home.
Oh, wow.
My grandfather went with my grandmother to the hospital, but it was like a couple hours later when the older children were like, "Where's the baby?" Because they didn't know, they didn't hear crying or anything. And my mom, who was the second oldest, she told me this story. She said, we started looking around to find the baby. And she said she was laying in one of the chairs next to the fireplace. And one of the barn cats that like to come in the house had curled up next to the baby and near the fireplace and had been caring for the baby, keeping it warm. She said, she said she was fine. She was sleeping right along. And I'm like, that's just weird, but that was the practice of those days.
That was,
they were more worried about my grandmother and bleeding to death than they were about the newborn baby.
Wow.
So, and then it was expected with the other children, the older children, to take care of it, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
So a lot of things that were 200 years ago aren't really that far off of things that are still happening in today's society.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of thing, and so I thought it was irony because I'm a cat fan.
Yeah.
And Poe was a cat fan, he had Katerina.
Yeah.
So, and I thought it was very interesting when I heard that, Katerina, died only about a couple years after Poe did.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And
stayed with Virginia on her deathbed. I mean, yeah.
I mean, animals are a crazy thing. So the instinct to care is really odd. But yeah, that's all the. I mean, there is many, many, many researches out there about the childbirth in those time periods, but also during the mid 1800s and early 1800s, Reformation was going on. So you had the Reformation with the jails, the hospitals. Ben Franklin was the first to actually get a hospital in Philadelphia put into place. So he was very much a proponent. I love how my kids, every time I ask them in the classroom who the first president is, and they want to say Ben Franklin. And I'm like, guys, Ben Franklin did a lot, but he was not president ever. Not a president. Really? Then they actually like, really? Yes, really. I'm like,
he could have been.
He could have.
George Washington was the first, and they're but when was Ben Franklin was never a president. Okay. It's like, don't argue with me. Just listen.
Goodness.
But I said he did, he's on our money, because that's the one thing they want to throw in my face. Well, he's on the $100 bill. I'm like, yeah. Doesn't mean he was a president, though.
Yeah.
They didn't just stamp the presidential heads on the currency. There are a few people that were never president that are on the money. And they're like, okay.
Wow.
Oh, goodness.
Teenagers.
Oh, that's funny. It's cute, though.
Yeah.
Well,
don't get me started about them arguing about 51 states.
Oh, yeah. No, we're not going there.
There's not 51 states.
No. Yeah, and they will argue. But anyway, to kind of to me, that's a very somber thing to think of with what happened with practices like that during that time frame, and probably how many children didn't make it or mothers didn't make it. Let's change the tone and go to one of Poe's poems entitled "The Happiest Day."
It's a Gothic tea party. I mean, come on.
I know. And yes, Poe had some dark and dreary, but let's have a less melancholy today.
All right, so let's just go right into one of Edgar Allan Poe's poems called "The Happiest Day."
Take
it away, Jeanie.
All right. The happiest day, the happiest hour, my seared and blighted heart hath known. The highest hope of pride and power I feel hath flown.
Of power, said I. Yes, such I ween, but they have vanished long, alas. The visions of my youth have been, but let them pass.
And pride, what have I now with thee? Another brow may even inherit the venom thou hast poured on me. Be still, my spirit.
The happiest day, the happiest hour, mine eyes shall see, have ever seen, the brightest glance of pride and power I feel have been.
But were that hope of pride and power now offered with the pain, even then I felt the brightest hour I would never live again.
For on its wing was dark alloy, and as it fluttered fell, in essence powerful to destroy a soul that knew it well.
I have to do the snaps.
Snaps.
We got the snaps.
And and that is a beautiful poem, and I don't think I know I've read it before. It's been a while. It's really lovely. It really is.
It's one of his
I think it's one
known.
And it should be more known, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
In my humble opinion.
Yes. And one thing I meant to do, does it say on the website what year he published that one?
I'm pretty sure it was published with Tamerlane.
Okay.
I think that is from Tamerlane.
Okay.
In his first little pamphlet.
Hold on.
Okay.
Let me see. I believe that is with Tamerlane. Yes. If I'm looking at this correctly, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, 1827.
Okay.
So definitely with Tamerlane.
Yeah, Tamerlane and other poems. It was in the page 33 and 34 in 1827.
Okay. All right.
Very small book.
And his brother also did some edits on that poem too. I guess Poe had first published it, and his brother had recommended a few edits, and then Poe went on to edit it and edit it and edit it. And that's why we all struggled to find the same version of the poem to recite together, because there are so many little differences in all the versions that you find, even published editions of his works that are completed editions, because there were so many edits. There are little tiny differences in some of the publications of that poem.
Yeah, because I think
in
my book, in my collected works, it only had 5 stanzas, and then it was like, okay, let's find the one online, and it had 6, and I was like, oh, hold on, we need to decide which one we're reading.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something I find really fascinating, as they're finding more and more little treasures as they're finding, where they're finding older, they're like, oh, wait, this is blah, blah, blah. But there's an extra verse here, So it's like, as they're finding that, I'm sure, as we all do, have our multiple collections of the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe. And it's like, before we started, I started to panic because I had grabbed the wrong collection. And I'm like, oh my God, it's not in this book, which is truly bizarre, because when it says the complete works, you would think that all the poems that to that point were known were in there. But I know I've got 3 different collections of poetry, specifically of Poe's, that have, and I'm not even kidding when I say this, each version of the poem Ulalume is different.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know in my completed works, it's actually sitting right under my teacup and candle. Alone is not in there. That poem,
really?
Poem Alone, is not in here. And Jeannie and I were talking about it one day, and we were trying to decide if we were going to use it for one of our episodes. And I was like, I can't find it. I'm like, am I crazy? And I wasn't. It literally is not in the book. So,
oh, that's bizarre.
It's very bizarre. I'm like, how could you forget that one? But whoever put it together just did not include it.
Well, according to this, Poe's brother was the one that revised it to 5 stanzas. The happiest day.
Interesting.
Yes, because it was published again it seems that the first version of the poem, the untitled, the one that we just read, it appeared in the Tamerlane and Other Poems, but apparently this was the revision that he revised it down to 5 stanzas because the publication was, didn't do so well, I guess. So he made the modifications, Henry. But it says that he perhaps got Edgar's approval to make it, but who knows? But yeah, that's why there's 5 stanzas in certain ones and 6 in the others. The original publication from Tamerlane and Other Poems is where you'll find the original 6. And it even says that there's should be initials of his his brother, underneath his revision part. So,
interesting.
WHP. So.
Okay. That's
interesting.
That is very interesting.
But that makes sense, actually, of that day and time.
Yeah.
Because one of the interesting things, since we've been talking about Abraham Lincoln, there's never been found the original written speech for the Gettysburg Address.
Oh, wow.
There has been 5 that have been found, but they're never identical, and it was never known if he actually had wrote it himself or someone else wrote it for him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
that's
it's very interesting. I mean, these are just little tidbits because think about it. Back then, it was a piece of paper that you would write your things, but you didn't keep track of them.
Yeah,
because it was like whatever.
Yes, if somebody could find a copy of the original or one version of it, that would be amazing to see.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, they don't know which one is the actual original.
Right.
Because he never signed the copy.
Oh, wow.
They just know that it's the Gettysburg Address. That's just the title of it. So.
Okay. Well, we have so enjoyed celebrating Edgar Allan Poe's 215th birthday with you guys. And we are now going to all give a just short little toast to Mr. Edgar Allan Poe. So I'm going to read a little portion of a poem that I wrote a few years ago called The Raven's Mourning. And it's kind of between the raven and Poe is in the grave, but he's come alive to speak to the raven, basically. So this is just a little short part at the end. The raven bound his head content as the poet's pen did relent. Thank you, sir, for the writings poured. It's my time to be nevermore. Poe went now to restful sleep, his secret not hidden or deep. Once upon a dark moon rising, one may see a raven flying. O'er the grave, a poet dear, to protect his soul with no fear. Happy birthday, Mr. Edgar Allan Poe.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that.
Jeanie, thank you.
Oh, yes. Now mine. I don't have anything as much as a poem to read. I just want to say a little few words of how Edgar Allan Poe has been a staple in my education, in my life, due to his wonderful words, and knowing those words and knowing they came from his heart have helped me bypass many, many things in my life that I thought I would never face and could overcome. So happy birthday to you, Mr. Poe.
Yay.
Well said. Well said,
Yes.
Jeanie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Levi, I think it's you or Virginia. Which one was next?
Yes, Levi.
Yes.
So I love what Jeanie said. I loved Carmen's poem. And my little tribute kind of celebrates Poe, of course, but all of us. For me personally, Poe has been an outlet since I was 12 years old. And so pursuing his life and his writings have brought me so many wonderful experiences and have made me so many great connections. So if it wasn't for Poe, I would have never been a part of such an amazing community of people who are so passionate and kind. And so today, as we celebrate Edgar Allan Poe's birthday, albeit without him here, we come together as a community, right? As kindred spirits, artists, as writers, as poets, scholars, podcasters, as people who just appreciate Poe's genius. So as much as it's about Poe, it's about us. And he's not only left a legacy of his own, but a fan base that has created so many friendships. So happy birthday, Poe. And from this Poe fan, I thank you.
Nicely
Very well
done.
said.
And sorry,
Beautiful.
my Poe the cat wanted to come up here, and so I grabbed him, and sorry, he was kind of
It's all right. A cat appearance
that's all right.
is never a bad
Yes.
thing.
Yeah, he
Elliot's
asked to
been
come
up and down.
Yes.
Elliot's been up and down. He's back now, on my lap. I'm sure you can see little ears. So probably saw the tail as he was getting comfortable. And so now comes my toast. I needed a little drink first. Obviously, I think I can safely say that there have been lots of people who shaped my life over the years, women, men from all over the globe. But I have to say, he is single-handedly probably, I don't know how to put it, has had the most profound effect on my life, has had the most influence on my life, whether I wanted to see it or not. And without him, without the family, where would I be? You know? So it's a miracle. I'm glad he was born. I'm glad he was here. I wish we could have had him longer.
Mm-hmm.
But we had what we had. We got a lifetime for him. And so without him, I would not have you guys.
I know.
Happy birthday, Eddie.
Let's all raise a glass.
Happy birthday, Eddie.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, darling.
Happy birthday, Mr. Poe.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. 215 years and he's still looking good. Just like the day he was
He
born.
is.
Just saying.
I hope to look that good.
Exactly. Hope to look that good. Yes, I do.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much for joining us to do this birthday celebration. This Gothic tea was amazing. It was so much fun.
It really was.
It was a blast. I had so much fun doing this, guys.
Yes.
Thank you for having us.
Learned a lot too. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah. That's what happens when you have teachers in the mix. We don't know how not to teach. I'm just saying. Hey, although I will pat myself on the back. I didn't go too far off the rails. So
that's true. That's true.
We need to get her a present.
We do. Yes.
She needs an Academy Award
because I did well.
Oh, and I want to send one little shout out to our friend Holly Knightley. Her book, Eye of Athena, is coming out today. And so please go check it out. I have read about a third of the way through the book, and it's great. And total, if you know Poe, you will grab all the little nuggets she has left along the way. It's very good. It's exciting. So go check out her book, and it's called Eye of Athena. So I guess on that note, we are
Poe
out.
He had opened his oblong box in order to feast his eyes on the pictorial pleasure within. There was nothing in this, however, to make him sob. I repeat, therefore, that it must have been simply a freak of my own fancy, distempered by good Captain Hardy's green tea.